The moment our fellow geeks, weebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
All right, so shall we begin our Avengers?
Yes. Record away.
Welcome everybody.
Welcome. Very special episode here.
Very special. It's been a very long time, it feels like, since we've done a 5-bucket.
I don't remember what our last 5-bucket was.
Seven Samurai? I think Seven Samurai was our last 5-bucket.
That was a while ago.
The loose rule that we go by is that if one person on the team thinks it's a 5-bucket, then everybody follows. But this was not on your list. We all submitted lists when we first started this enterprise of what our 5-bucket considerations would be. And this was on my list. It was also on Mike's list. So there was more than one of us that
I knew that this was on top of Mike's list. And I guess I didn't realize that it was on your list as well. And I know that Mike, our previous host, this was his foray back into the world of comic books. As a kid growing up, he read comics or whatever, had walked away from it. And it was this movie that propelled him back to the psycho collector that he is now, where he is collecting everything he ever owned as a kid plus Mob Rules, which is, you know, if one of us thinks it's 5-bucket, then we all rally around it.
Right.
And I just questioned the fact that, you know, I knew this was Mike's. Mike's no longer on the show. And then you were like, well, no, it's on mine too. And I'm like, okay. The interesting thing, if anybody doesn't even know what we're talking about, we're talking about Avengers.
The first Avengers, 2012 Avengers.
Yes, 2012. So this is the culmination of the MCU's phase 1.
Yes.
This was the 6th movie. Oh, we got Iron Man 2,
Incredible Hulk,
Captain America, First
Thor.
Avenger, and Thor. So these were our 5 standalone movies that all came together in this movie. And the funny thing is that we're now talking 9 years after the fact. And we have Endgame and we have Guardians of the Galaxy and we have these giant ensemble movies now that to me tower over this. Yes, this was cute at the time, but I did go back and rewatch it.
Cute at the time.
I will. But think about the fact how. Look at Captain America's costume. Stuck in the comic book world as you're going to get. It's straight on spandex. It is pretty accurate, kind of, to the comic book counterpart.
Well, here's the thing: is that at the time, this, you know, we talk about our history as kids and, you know, even bringing back the holiday special. This is what we had. This is what we had on offer at the time, that, you know, and we ate it up. And I will put this first Avengers movie firmly in this category. Now, the reason I give it 5 buckets is because very rarely does a movie make me feel like I'm 12 years old again, sitting in the theater. Very rarely do I get the same feeling, and it brings me right back to sitting in the theater watching Empire Strikes Back, watching Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time, watching E.T. for the first time. There's movies I love that have come out since that early 80s heyday, but very few times in my history of movie watching do I get transported back to my 12-year-old self. And Avengers easily did that almost from the opening credits. And I was a kid sitting in that theater. I could have been throwing popcorn up and catching it in my mouth. I don't know what I was regressing to at that point, but it felt like I was a child again watching the Avengers. And that is a large part of it.
Yes, I'm not going to step on that. And to just follow up on what I was saying, which is I didn't really, again, you know, I look at all the other ones that have come after that, but I sat down and watched this yesterday, and I agree with you, wholeheartedly agree with you, that this was unlike anything we had ever seen. This, again, was, you know, we got the standalone Iron Man movie. Iron Man and Captain America are on my top 5 Marvel MCU movies. But watching this unfold and watching each one of those characters get their introduction and bring everything together has never been done before. And yes, I went right back into that. All right, Jim is absolutely correct. This is an excellent Saturday morning popcorn movie that just gets you into feels, and it does make you feel giddy.
Okay, so going back to Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr.
Yep.
First of a lot of things, you get your first Easter egg that you now expect from every single Marvel movie that you've seen since Iron Man. And what an Easter egg it is. You are promised an Avengers movie. You're more than happy to be seeing Iron Man, first of all, in a film that's produced by Marvel. But now you're telling me that not only am I going to see Iron Man again on screen, but you're giving me Captain America. You're giving me Thor. You're giving me Hulk again, rebooted. I couldn't wait for the years to fly by after leaving Iron Man. Like, how long am I going to have to wait to see this? Am I going to still be alive?
You're talking about the end credit scene of Nick Fury showing up,
yes,
and basically saying to Tony, "Have you ever heard of the Avengers Initiative?"
Right, exactly.
And we've got those teases throughout those movies, right? And they pulled this off. I will say, I have the Blu-ray. And I specifically watched, because I've seen this movie enough times, I watched the Joss Whedon commentary. And I think we just need to clear the air about that up front, because this does have a little bit of an asterisk in front of it based on what we know about him as a person now. Because it does taint it a little bit.
Because his name is all over this, when you're watching the closing credits, directed by Joss Whedon, story by Joss Whedon, screenplay by Joss Whedon.
This was his baby. I mean, this was only his second feature film after Serenity. But as you say, he cut his teeth with Firefly and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and his name is these guys that are so synonymous with the stuff that we're engrossed in. John Lasseter, and to hear stories, accusations and allegations of misdeeds and misuse of power, I guess, is very disconcerting.
It's all the more disheartening when the entertainment that is produced rallies against such behavior. It taints it, and I'm really sad that it does.
It is very sad. It's very upsetting. And when I listened to the commentary, there was a couple things that he said that now they're cringeworthy. He actually said straight up, my intent of filmmaking is to make the experience as terrible as possible. And I'm like, that's horrible, because people are now accusing you of making it as horrible as possible. And numerous times my wife actually popped her head up while I'm watching this and said, did he just say that? Or who's saying this? And I'm like, it's the same guy. So yeah, unfortunately, you have to kind of take this in the context of everything that came after, with the allegations from Ray Fisher about the conditions on the set of Justice League. I haven't really heard anything about this movie in particular.
No.
Listen, again, like with John Lasseter, adore the guy. Had a Pixar. The guy looked like everyone's favorite uncle with his favorite fun flowery shirt on. And then you hear these stories and you're just kind of like.
But watching this again, I was able to pull myself away from knowing these stories, at least until the closing credits, when his name was just suddenly plastered.
Well, like I said, I listened to him talk through the entire movie.
Right.
But I just wanted more. I wanted to bring a little more of the technical aspects and some of the challenges that went into this, because again, you're taking 5 individual characters who all have their own standalone movie. And now not only are you supposed to bring them back and reintroduce them, but then they have to gel together as a group.
You take it for granted now, because Marvel is, just does this so well. They've created the MCU, but the MCU started with Iron Man. We didn't have anything like this before, intertwining movies.
We had Ang Lee's Hulk.
Yeah, but this was much more complex, because you had the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies.
Yep.
You had your Bryan Singer X-Men movies.
Yep.
You had your Ang Lee Hulk. They existed separately. There was no references made to, Spider-Man in the X-Men movies or vice versa, or nothing going on in the Hulk.
Everything, yeah, they all existed in a vacuum.
So anything that was released theatrically by Marvel, and I'm even going to Blade or Punisher or these lower tier movies that came out in the 90s, Daredevil, they never intertwined. So this was new territory. Not even thinking about the Avengers, but just knowing that there were going to be other characters that existed in the same space. That you were going to have a Thor movie that existed in the same universe as Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man.
Yep.
Was incredible to me. And then the fact when these movies started rolling out, like that little tease that you got at the end of the Hulk, the Easter egg with Robert Downey Jr. there was huge that he appeared in that.
I'm gonna give all the credit in the world to Jon Favreau on this. Jon Favreau, who directed the first Iron Man movie, set the stage because he created the standards, which is you're taking these fantastical elements and these ideas of a guy in a flying suit and grounding it in reality as much as humanly possible. And the same thing with Captain America, which was Dante, so that when you get to a Thor movie, even though it has more fantastical elements, it's still grounded to a certain degree, because you have to believe these guys. You have to believe that they really are existing in our world. And so I think Favreau really laid the foundation and cemented everything in the MCU that came after.
Reading just some background of this, that's why he was hesitant to direct Avengers himself, because he felt that he wasn't the right person to strike that balance between the fantastical and the reality-based world that he had introduced in the first Iron Man.
Yeah, because you now have to bring in a Thor to interact with these characters. Loki's kind of like this little mischievous, he pops in and out or whatever. But imagine being given that opportunity and just being like, you know what? I'm not your guy.
Because not only do you have Thor, but you've got, a guy from the 40s. You've got a big monster,
Yeah. And so, and again, rewatching this now and watching the way that they introduced each character and how they introduced each character from one to another. Like, we're 40 minutes into this before you see anybody outside of Loki in a superhero costume, which is pretty impressive. And this is our first introduction to Ruffalo as Bruce Banner.
Yes.
And apparently every day on set, he would walk up to Whedon and be like, it's not too late to recast. Like, he was so questioning why they chose him, but he kills it. And one of the things I read, which is that he adhered to the Bixby model of Banner as this guy who just wants to help people. And that the monster is just, it's there and he's doing his best to control it. Obviously, Bixby every week loses his cool and became the Hulk. Otherwise, we wouldn't be watching the show. I love the way that each one of these characters is introduced again, right up with Loki. We get Loki first with the opening scene in the SHIELD headquarters or whatever this lab was.
Knowing what you do now, it kind of changes your perspective on watching this movie, because they're only a movie away from the Hydra reveal in SHIELD.
Right.
But yes, you've got like an underground SHIELD headquarters where they've got the Tesseract, which is I know your favorite MacGuffin out of all the MacGuffins in all the Marvel movies.
And it just keeps coming back.
It's coming back. It's
going to play out again in Loki, right? Yeah, it has to.
And it seems like this is fortuitous that we're watching this now.
Yes, I'm very excited that once you start realizing that everything that's going to take place in the Loki movie, this is the Loki we're seeing in
the Loki series.
It's not the one that's progressed past this in the other movies.
Right.
Yeah, he's still this malicious, malevolent entity. That's an interesting thing. I was very shocked. They talked a lot about when they were filming this, he knew it was going to be converted into 3D. So there's a lot of elements and a lot of thought that went into shooting certain things a certain way for the 3D elements. I've never watched it in 3D, and I know it was post-converted, but I guess pretty much every special effects house had their fingers in this. Weta, ILM, you name it, Digital Domain. They all, this is just you would not believe how many sets that were completely digital that just don't exist. but it all works. It's all just a beautiful
it does.
build.
It does. The bad guy here is Loki. So he's returning from Thor. And now it's not enough just to have him because, Thor can handle Loki pretty well on his own. Well, that's arguable. But you do need Loki to have some more firepower in order to take on and be a match for the Avengers. So he's got an army behind him, which doesn't really come into play until the closing of the movie.
Yeah.
The Chitauri army.
Which we all wanted to be the Skrulls, right?
Yes.
We're like, why are you bringing these characters or whatever? But now it makes perfect sense. We don't want the Skrulls revealed at this point.
No, it's too early. It's too early.
But we were given all of this on a silver platter, and we're like, just give it to me all. Give it to me. Like,
I know.
Like,
no,
you can only eat one piece of food at a time. You can't have a whole platter. And it's like, no, just give me the whole bag.
But before this, Loki shows up and Nick Fury realizes he's got to put the band together, right? So it's like a Blues Brothers kind of a scenario. And that's what makes this work so well. And this is why it's my favorite of the Avengers movies, is because you never get that meet cute moment again between all of these characters. And Whedon gives you really,
afterwards,
and I'll give it to Whedon. He gives the audience what they want. Like all those what if scenarios. Well, what if Thor hit Cap's shield with the hammer? Well, you get that. You see what happens.
This was one thing that Marvel like demanded that it be in, that we have that Iron Man Thor standoff. Like they wanted the conflict between these characters.
Yep. And like, what would happen if Thor fought the Hulk? Well, you get that. You see a fight between Thor and the Hulk.
Yeah. There's one of my favorite camera moves of all of cinema in this later on, and we'll get to it. But after that opening sequence where Loki runs away with the Tesseract and the whole shield facility is crumbling around him, and then it cuts the title. Like that's just the setup. That's just the opening, and then that's when you get the conversation between Coulson, who's just seeing Coulson come back, who's been the underlying tie-in, him and Nick Fury to a certain point, but I think Coulson more so, that continually popped up in all of those little teaser trailers. He's the thread that ties all of these characters. He's the underlying motivation for why they agree to work together.
Fury kind of pulls their strings at the end. He's their motivation to get them back together on the same playing field at the end of the movie. Watching Coulson in this, it kind of makes you realize how the movie's lost a little bit of something when they lost him. Even though he did move on to, his own show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but he never really dipped his toe into the movie world again, even though S.H.I.E.L.D. referenced the films.
I know.
The films didn't reference Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so he was gone. And you miss him. You do miss him.
Yeah, I agree. But after that, that's when we're introduced to Natasha. And this immediately, informs you. I mean, we have seen her in Iron Man 2 at this point, correct?
Yes, we have. So we already have been introduced to her. But what's funny is you're talking about Natasha and how it's fortuitous that we're watching this now. When Loki is talking to her one-on-one, once, Loki is imprisoned in the S.H.I.E.L.D. ship, he mentions San Paulo, the hospital. And I'm thinking, am I going to see these things now in Black Widow in 2 months,
Yeah. I mean, she talks about with the Hawkeye at one point. She goes, this reminds me of, I'm going to draw a blank. It reminds her of something. He goes, you and I have vastly different ideas on
that memory.
And that is where he refers to her as a mewling Quim. And there was quite a lot of dialogue or talk about Loki's eloquent Elizabethan speak and how well that would play out. And they're like, he's got to just go for it. This is the character.
The bread and butter, going back, to the beginning and where the characters are just being introduced to each other. The back and forth between each pair-off of these characters is just priceless to me. Especially the rivalry between Captain America and Iron Man is set off right from the get-go. It's like oil and water. They do not get along, and they never will.
I mean, just think about the personality. Tony Stark lives in a world all his own. Tony Stark does whatever Tony Stark wants for Tony Stark's purposes. Captain America is there for America. He's got a purpose, and now he has an even bigger purpose because, he's looking to find a purpose. Let's put it that way. Because when we're introduced to him, he's just beating the snot out of these sandbags. And I love the fact, and I guess I never picked up on it, but he's in like one of these old-timey turn of the century gyms.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the time that you wouldn't see him working out in Planet Fitness. It would completely take away the essence of this character, which is he's holding on to what he knows. So like little things like that just informed the character so much. And it was Budapest, by the way.
It was Budapest. Okay.
Budapest. There's no way in my mind I could get rid of that.
You and I remember Budapest very differently.
Yep. Yes, there you go. So I'm hoping between the Hawkeye series and Black Widow, we could get a Budapest flashback.
Okay. But going back to Cap in that gym, it's almost like he is waiting for Fury to give him the mission. You got a mission for me? Give me something to do here.
Yeah. And he even, his line, this is the genius of cutting this stuff. And I know it goes through numerous iterations and that, things are in different places. When you're shooting a movie, sometimes these sequences don't always end up where you intended them to be. But his walkout line is, "You should have left me in the ocean." And then what do? We cut to Iron Man in the ocean. And I'm like, that's a little spot on, but dude, I'm on board.
Yep.
And then that's where we're introduced to Tony Stark again. And I will tell you that Robert Downey Jr. fought to have Pepper in this film to ground his character. And once she was on set, Whedon was like, you always put a Gwyneth in a frame. He goes, "This is one thing I've learned. This woman just controls and commands a certain level of respect when she's on set." So it was a good call because it does.
And you know what?
him.
You know what it does accomplish is it humanizes even more Coulson's character, because it's her that brings up the cellist that he's seeing.
Yeah.
So you do get a real sense of loss when you finally do get to Coulson's death towards the end.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
And I think for the longest time we were always speculating that was going to be the Scarlet Witch, because at one point she may or may not have played.
Yes, I remember that scuttlebutt. Yeah.
No, it went nowhere.
The mission that Captain America is given is to apprehend or to face off with Loki in Germany. Loki has the scepter in the Avengers. So we've got two Infinity Stones in play here, the Tesseract and the Mind Stone. So Loki has taken over Hawkeye, and I'm not really sure what Hawkeye was after with it. Something to open the portal, something to do with the portal opening that had to work with the Tesseract. But they had to pull this guy's eye out in Germany in order to give Hawkeye access.
To get access to it, yeah.
To get access to this thing. But in the meantime, Loki engages with Captain America, who is a little bit outmatched. So I am surprised. The one thing that did surprise me looking at this, because Cap is so, in the consequent movies of his own and in the Avengers, he is the de facto leader of the team, even when Stark is there. In this movie, he is so unsure of himself and what he should be doing at any given time. He's almost like insecure about his lack of abilities as compared to Thor, compared to Hulk, and the suit. And
he's definitely a man out of time, and he's probably a little rusty. I mean, we see him beating up some sandbags, but beyond that, what has he really done since they thawed him out?
And as a matter of fact, if you look at the theatrical poster,
he
is the farthest one.
Yeah.
He's the farthest one in the background.
That is so funny you point that out, because I just looked at the front of my Blu-ray before coming down here to record, and Iron Man's front and center.
Yep.
So, but I mean, he's got to look around his world and be like, do I even can make a difference? Look at this guy's in a super suit. There's craziness. This guy could turn into a giant monster.
Cap, who is so self-assured, every other time you've seen him, can't really handle Loki in the scene in Germany. And there's a great scene, you're talking about the eloquence of Tom Hiddleston. Like Zod in Superman 2
kneel before me.
All these civilians to kneel, and the one guy that doesn't is this old man. He's like, "I know men like you," and you get the sense that this guy's a World War II survivor, right? Maybe concentration
because they're
camp.
in Germany, and he makes some reference about, the last time I'll never kneel before someone in Germany or again, or something like that.
And then he's like, "Listen to your elder." Like I'm going to make an example of him. And then Cap comes and saves the day. But Cap can't contain Loki, and it takes Iron Man to come in and do it for him. So that's like sets off this chain of events where Cap is, I think, really searching for himself, and he comes into his own during the final battle of New York, when he finally becomes the Cap that we're used to.
Filmed in Cleveland, by the way.
The German sequence?
Yeah, it was a courthouse in Cleveland.
A courthouse.
A courthouse in Cleveland.
Wasn't even an opera house in Cleveland?
No. There's a couple of really nice set pieces in here, but we jumped over the introduction of the helicarrier, which is just another nerdy dork moment when when Steve and Bruce are on the, now this is all completely CG, by the way. They could only afford 2 planes because the military is not involved in this movie. So I guess the military only will loan out equipment if you're actually filming something about the military. So they didn't have access to any of these ships. So there's only 2 actual physical fighter jets on like a green screen, and everything else around them is CG.
And talk about being transported to your childhood again. This scene maybe did it more so than any other scene in the movie because being a tried and true Godzilla fan and a fan of the Godzilla Marvel comics, the helicarrier is what they followed Godzilla around in.
Yeah.
So I was very familiar with this, and seeing that was just a dream come true on screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that command deck is really impressive as well. And this is where we're introduced to Maria Hill, which is, my wife laughs. She goes, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that this is the girl from How I Met Your Mother. She's gone on to do other things.
Yeah.
She's now Maria Hill now. She kicks ass. Yeah. And we get Mark Ruffalo in a purple shirt.
We also get Loki apprehended. So Iron Man and Captain America are accompanying Loki on this plane, and suddenly a storm. And Loki looks a little bit apprehensive. And they're like, what's the matter? You don't like thunder? It's not so much thunder, but what comes after it.
And this is a great reveal of Thor.
And Thor just appears like the gremlin from Twilight Zone, the movie. He's riding the plane, and then he comes in and just absconds with Loki, and he's gone. And then again, we get a big lofty speech that Thor like, brother, what are you doing? You know, we could rule together. Loki's not having any of it. And then there's one line, I think Thor says, you know, I want to tell you something, and boom, suddenly Iron Man flies in and hits Thor, and he's gone. And then Loki's like, I'm listening. Yeah.
During that whole fight, at one point, Thor headbutts Iron Man, and I never noticed there's a dent on his helmet
after he headbutts Iron Man.
Yeah, you know, hero misunderstanding fight.
And we get the classic line about Shakespeare in the Park from Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
Does mother knoweth you've stolen her drapes?
That is actually an ad lib. There's quite a few lines in this movie that were completely ad libbed by him. That being one of them.
But Loki, tellingly, does not try to run away while they're fighting because he's captured anyway afterwards. So if that doesn't give you a clue that he's up to something, I don't know what would.
Nope. Bring me on board. I'll be happy.
So now our heroes, including Banner, are on the helicarrier, you know, as well as Black Widow.
Ruffalo doesn't really have a lot of dialogue initially when you're on the helicarrier, but you see him, he's uncomfortable. He's now in a confined space in air, and he's looking, you see him kind of checking out the doorways, and like he's looking for an out if something happens and he hulks out. But it's all like said without being said. Little stuff like this that you pick up on after a while is pretty right down to Tony Stark wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt.
I love the fact that he pokes him at one point. He's like, I'm a big fan of when he turned into a huge green rage monster. And then he pokes him, and then Captain America's yelling at Tony Stark for, what are you doing? Because Cap doesn't want to meet the Hulk, apparently.
No. This is where you get that Loki Black Widow scene as well, because he's in that confinement. That thing weighed, I think he said it was like 18 tons. The actual containment prison, the cylindrical prison, like that was a physical set that they built. 18 tons seems to be a lot.
So the set itself, it wasn't just what it was supposed to weigh, but the set actually weighed
18 tons. Yeah.
Wow.
Right? It's like you couldn't have used lighter materials, boys.
Where do you keep that without it falling through whatever floor that it's sitting on?
Right.
So Black Widow, they get the one-on-one between Black Widow and Loki, and she works out that he is trying to make them bicker because he knows that SHIELD wanted the Tesseract to make weapons, and also to be a form of, sustainable energy as well, because then there's also this ties in with the arc reactor that Stark has developed, which we know from Iron Man 2 and different things that I think that Stark's father developed this arc reactor based on his research of the Tesseract, right? Am
Yeah.
I mistaken
Yeah,
with that?
no, I
or-
believe that is the exact timeline.
Yeah.
But we haven't really heard anything more about that in any of the subsequent
No,
movies.
I was convinced that that would play in somehow to how that they would defeat Thanos in the
Right.
Infinity War movies, but no, it didn't play out like that at all. But yes, so Loki's goal is to divide and conquer, as Stark himself says. And I don't think that they need Loki to do this. They're doing a great job on
Well,
their own.
I think the scepter is the Mind Stone is what's fueling this, because you get that beautiful scene where the scepter is laying there and they're bickering back and forth, and the camera, I love this shot, and it's so simplistic. It follows the characters, and then it flips completely around until it's upside down, and now the scepter is front and center while these characters, so you get the impression that this is what's kind of pushing,
setting
the
them
narrative. Yeah, correct.
Because and you do get that reveal that Banner unconsciously reaches for the scepter and has it in his hand at one point.
Unbeknownst to himself, he's like, what? Oh.
I didn't even consider that. Loki doesn't have to impale you with the scepter in order to take over your mind. It can do it by itself.
Yeah, close proximity to it. And but this is also where we get the beautiful Hulk for the first time.
The Hulk out scene in the helicarrier. Now, there's an iconic shot of the Hulk chasing Black Widow and just demolishing the helicarrier as he's trying to get to her. And then comes up against Thor. Maybe my hands down favorite scene is Thor holding out his hand and waiting for Mjolnir to arrive. And you hear it, bang, bang, bang.
Right, it's making its way through the ship. Yeah.
And I'd like to know where he put it. You know, it's like,
It
what
was in
room
his locker,
is that
right?
in? Yeah.
I think he always carries it with him. Why would he leave it?
Why would he leave it somewhere?
Right, but you're right. That Widow chase scene, and you know, it's like there's like a tight little glass corridor, and she's running through it, and he's just smashing things left and right.
Yep.
That's such a realized scene. It's such a beautiful scene, and they did ILM work specifically on the Hulk, and they did most of it with motion capture with Ruffalo. Even though he is a quote unquote CG character, he did act out most of it.
Like an Andy Serkis kind of a situation.
Yes, correct. And when Thor punches him, that plane, that's actually the plane from True Lies.
Really?
Yeah, that is the actual plane used
Wow.
in the end of True Lies.
But we do get hammer to Hulk's face in this as well. Hulk gets knocked on his butt by Thor's hammer and then tries to lift it up, which another what if moment that Whedon is just handing out. Like, what if Hulk tried to pick up the hammer?
Right.
Can't do it. Can't do it.
I think it wasn't until Ultron that we got that scene with everyone trying to lift it, right?
Yeah.
That's where Captain America budges it. Yeah.
Where Cap did the fake out of
yeah.
oh yeah, I can't lift it either. What a good guy. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to make Thor feel bad, so he's not going to embarrass Thor in front of everybody.
I don't know. Did he really think that he was going to be able to lift it? I think he might have been just as
I think he was
just as surprised that it moved.
Like,
But this is also where we lose Coulson.
Coulson doesn't get taken over. He gets impaled by Loki, unfortunately.
Sorry, boss. The guy rabbited. But that great line where he shoots Loki and he's like, oh, so
that's what it does. Yeah.
But we neglected. There's another storyline with Coulson because he's a little awestruck by Captain America, and you find out he's a bit of a geek and a nerd and a Captain America fan. And he's got these trading cards that he's been collecting. They're vintage. He mentions at one point. But yeah, this is where Fury uses that to galvanize these guys.
Because you find out later, Maria Hill lets it be known that the cards were not in Coulson's jacket. They were in his locker. So whose blood is on those cards?
Well, he had to go out of his way to probably wipe blood on. He's like, come here. You're dead anyways, dude. Those are vintage cards. You just ruined them.
Ugh.
A little foxing around the edges, but otherwise they're not too bad.
No, also we get Thor trapped in Loki's cage.
Yep.
And I love that. It's like, when are you not going to fall for this?
The doppelganger.
The doppelganger trick that Loki does so well.
Yep.
But Thor always gives him the benefit of the doubt. Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
I know. I don't know. Sometimes you believe enough in somebody eventually.
Because of the Hulk and because of Hawkeye still being controlled by Loki, damaging the helicarrier, we also get that scene where Cap and Iron Man have to work together. And again, Cap is really unsure of himself here, what to do to help in the situation where Iron Man has control of, what needs to be done and technically what to do. And Cap opens up that panel and he's like, well, this runs on some sort of electricity.
Yeah. Right. Good job, buddy.
Loki needs to use the Tesseract to open up the portal over New York City to bring the Chitauri in, the army that he's talking about through the whole film, into the city because he wants to take over the Earth. And in return, he's going to hand over the Tesseract to whoever's pulling his strings. So this is a little bit, knowing what you know after all these movies later. And this question has come up, and we've discussed this. Why did Thanos feel the need to use all these intermediaries? If he could just come to Earth himself and easily get his hands on these stones, why even bother with this whole play of Loki taking over the Earth and then giving him the Tesseract?
I think he's lazy.
Maybe he is. Maybe he
was
is
just
some
kinda
laziness going on.
I really like to rule the universe, but I don't feel like doing the work. This was the reveal at the end that it was Thanos that was kind of pulling the strings was enough for us to just be like, holy, they're doing this.
The fascinating thing, and maybe you have more insight because you listened to this commentary, is that Whedon requested to put this in, that it wasn't planned to put Thanos in originally. I'm not even sure if that was the main plot at this point.
Right, which is amazing that they didn't have this in place. The only thing that he brought up was the fact that he fought to bring in another villain because he didn't really think that Loki was a big enough threat, especially because we saw, in the Thor standalone movie, he was able to deal with him pretty soundly, and just didn't think that he was a big enough threat for this group, So bringing in the space aliens or whatever is fine and dandy, and it's beautiful with the space whales. Whatever, they bought into it, they did it, and we ended up in Infinity Wars and Endgame. So yeah, kudos to him if this was his,
if that was his idea. Who is the guy that was his minion there? Was that the Chitauri representative?
No, he was referred to as the Other, but I don't really know if this character exists in the comic world. There's a counterpart, but he was just like the intermediary.
But the big line is he's like, you're courting death. And then Thanos smiles.
And we know because Thanos was obsessed with death in the comic series, like the physical manifestation of death.
Hela, right? From Thor Ragnarok. Or is this something different?
It's something different. Like she's literally, a skeleton in a cloak kind of a thing. But that never played out. That never played into what Thanos ended up doing or what his motivations were.
No. But it was a clue. So if you weren't sure if that was him, then that line of dialogue was correct there to clue you in that who exactly that was.
For the longest time, I thought that was Grimace from the McDonald's.
When I first saw Avengers, I didn't identify him as Thanos immediately. I thought it was a Super Skrull. I thought it was a Skrull because he's got the same
with the
chin.
Wrinkled chins. Yeah. That would have made sense. That would have been good. It was Darkseid.
Yeah, Darkseid. But let's talk about the Battle of New York. You talked about those space whales, and talk about somebody that loves Godzilla movies. Seeing those space whales was amazing.
Yeah, they were awesome.
It was so well realized. And we haven't talked about the score yet, Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme. And you get that big circular reveal for the trailer moment of the Hulk roaring and,
that the moment when they're all together as one, like they've assembled, even though it's never said until Endgame. This is the moment where you're like, they did it. This is in this whole fight sequence, and it is chaos. You are jumping from one character to the other. And like you said before, up until this moment, Cap is really kind of apprehensive and unsure. But in this moment, he takes control.
Yes, he does.
Do this. You go there. You go. Hulk, smash.
Yep.
And it's just the camera when you're in a world like this and to orchestrate this and to have all these different elements going on, but it completely makes sense. The camera follows the Hulk down on the space whale, and then it cuts over to Hawkeye as he flies by. Hawkeye's there, and Hawkeye, we don't even talk about the fact because Hawkeye gets his facilities back, and he's shooting. I love this, which is he'll aim at something and then turn his head before he fires. So he's already looking at his next target before he even shoots his thing. And it's just subtle little new, because you're like, all right, this guy just shoots an arrow. How is he going to hold his own against these guys or with these guys?
Oh, and we didn't point out that all it takes is a knock on the head for Hawkeye to regain his senses.
And a good talking to. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. This whole end fight sequence is so iconic. It is just balls to the wall this last 25 minutes.
It is. And there's so many little individual confrontations here. Like Thor and Loki have a, a final showdown. where Thor again tries to convince his brother to see the light, and it doesn't work. And that great dialogue between Loki and Stark, when Stark, like his armor is damaged and he realizes he has to change armor. He puts those bracelets on as he's distracting Loki.
Yeah, he's making a drink. He's like, I have an army. Oh, we got a Hulk. The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves now.
And then Stark gets thrown through the window, and then of course his suit flies down to meet him.
The suit pretty much does anything you need it to do.
Yeah, it does in any given situation.
Yeah,
But as you said, Cap really takes control, and he tells everybody to keep it contained within 3 blocks. I'm like, is that really going to be that easy to do when you've got like an army of these aliens to deal with?
Yeah, but even when he has when the cops are trying to wrangle the people in, and Captain is standing there, and he tells the cops, "This is what we need to do," and he's like, "I'm not going to listen to you." And then the Chitauri just comes, and he just takes out like 5 of them in like 2 seconds, and then the cop looks at him, turns around, and immediately repeats everything Cap just said. All right, we need to cordon off this area. We need to do that. It's like, there you go. Cap is in charge.
Yeah. And as you said, comparing Cap's outfit, the outfits that came later, what he's wearing here seems very garish and, over the top bright. Looking at all these characters, Robert Downey Jr. not really counted in this, but Hemsworth and Evans, they look like kids compared to what they look like now, like in the later movies. You realize the time that's gone by. Yeah. Which is funny because Thor is supposed to be what, 2,000 years old? Or
maybe he moisturizes. Yeah. He's good. So, but this is also before the big hero moment when they're all standing there and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and Banner comes up on a little motorcycle. And they're like, now would be a good time, Go ahead, Doc, get angry. And he goes, no, what you don't understand is I'm always angry. He's holding it back, and he just transforms and punches that damn space whale. And it is probably one of my favorite Hulk moments, except for the fact when he punches Thor. He just sucker punches him right off screen. Yeah. And you're like what's coming, and you still laugh. Oh, excuse my friends. You still laugh. Like you said, there are so many great moments. Nick Fury with a rocket launcher, trying to take out the plane that's now coming with a nuke.
This is foreshadowing to Iron Man 3 even, but when Stark has that line of dialogue saying, I see it, but I don't believe it. And he's got PTSD from this battle in Iron Man 3.
Yeah, there's I can't say a bad thing about this whole, even the scene, again, you've got Captain America and Thor fighting back to back, and Mjolnir and the shield basically return to them at the exact same moment.
Yes.
Like, have you seen the outtakes? Like numerous gag outtakes, because they were filming that, actually coming to them, and inevitably one would drop their weapon.
Just assumed that was like backwards.
Reversed.
So yeah, that it was reversed.
That was actually but there's a couple of outtakes on the Blu-ray gag reel. The crazy thing is that half of that, 3/4 of that was filmed on a soundstage.
Really?
Which just boggles my mind.
You were talking about Downey's dialogue, a lot of it being ad-lib, but there's so much stuff that you can lose, like on first viewing, that you don't catch that he's saying. After Cap gives them directive as to what to do, you do this, you do that, you do that. And Hawkeye asks Iron Man for a lift, and Iron Man says, "Better clench up, Legolas." And before he takes off.
Yeah, I think the Galaga line was ad-libbed as well.
That man is playing Galaga.
Yeah, and they actually went back and added it. So
you didn't think we'd notice, but we did.
Yep.
And then you see the guy playing Galaga at the end of the scene. But it's great. It is iconic. And of course, the Hulk taking out Loki. Stop! I will not be bullied by a brute. And then Hulk just grabs him. Bam, 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 bam. Let me tell you. When I saw this in the theater, the audience just erupted.
Oh, absolutely.
When that happened. That was the big moment. And of course, when Cap says, Hulk, smash. And then the audience went bananas
lose their
when
minds.
He said that. Yeah.
Oh, I got goosebumps. I just got goosebumps.
Talked about the nuke, right? So Nick Fury stops the one plane, but he doesn't stop the second plane. But that is the solution to ending this. It's up to Tony Stark at the end to get that missile and to put it right into the portal. Put it where the sun don't shine. And it's a very Independence Day moment, right? It's like Jeff Goldblum.
Yes, yeah.
And Will Smith doing the same thing in Independence Day. And then he falls back to Earth, and the Hulk unceremoniously saves him and just slams him into the ground after they land. And it takes the Hulk's roar to wake him up. He's like, what the hell?
Yeah, that was good.
Again, I said it before. This is my favorite of all the Avengers movies. Endgame, Infinity War, as great as they are, as much as I love them,
Yeah.
I don't think they match the feeling that this gave me watching this for the first time in the theater. And it's because I love this so much is that I was invested as I was in Infinity War and Endgame.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this could have easily fallen apart. This could have been a disaster.
They hung the rest of their MCU on this, and this was make or break, And just to think about it, how this was in production for so many years before all the individual movies were even released. So this was a gamble. This was a big gamble.
Yeah. Well, we see what happens when DC just decides to go right for it and not do their due diligence with the other characters up front.
Yeah.
So some of these effects were not dropped in until a week before release, which is just, that's got to be like, dude, what are you doing? Where's my stuff? Where's my...
The shawarma scene was filmed the day after the premiere.
Yeah, that's
when you believe that? Can you believe that?
That was an add-on at the last minute.
Yeah.
You do know why Cap has only got his hand on his fist?
Yeah, well, I do know that, but let us know.
Because he was already filming Snowpiercer and he had a full beard, so he had to hide it.
He had a prosthetic that he was holding in place with.
Yeah, just to kind of
to hide the beard.
But it was funny because after this, my son immediately wanted shawarma, and it is one of our favorite go-tos now.
Oh,
and
where
because
you get
of this movie,
do you have a local shawarma joint?
I do.
Yeah?
I do. The little hole in the wall, and the guy's super cheap, and we love it. Absolutely love it. Yep. Go to my Grubhub. I set everything up and then I go and pick it up and we eat like champs.
One thing I did not know until yesterday is that Scarlett Johansson replaced Emily Blunt to play Black Widow.
Really?
Yes. Can you imagine? Well, I can imagine that.
Well, now that we've seen her, I was going to say, we saw her in action.
Yeah.
The British accent would have been thrown off, though. Not that she has a Russian accent, though.
Oh, she could have done American, I think.
Yeah.
She could have done anything. Now,
no, why was she replaced? Sorry, I didn't mean to scream. So that would go all the way back to Iron Man 2.
Iron Man 2. Yeah, that's where it happened. I don't know if she couldn't do it for whatever reason or not, but
I do love the fact that every time we do see Nat, that she's completely different hairstyle, which feeds into her espionage roots, that she's always undercover. She's always somebody else kind of a thing.
Here's another interesting fact. I don't know if Whedon said this on the commentary or not, but it was up in the air whether or not Johansson would be able to join filming of the Avengers because of prior commitments. So for a while in the script, it was the Wasp in Black Widow's place.
Oh, which would actually make more sense since she was a founding member of the original Avengers. Yeah. But you can't have the Wasp without Ant-Man.
I think they wanted Black Widow because she was already introduced, and it would be one less character to introduce the audience
to bring her into. I don't know if you noticed, but in some of those lab scenes, Tony Stark is he's always got like food in his hand, or he's always eating. I guess like he was actually hiding food on set. So when they'd film, he would just pull it out and start eating it.
Really?
Yeah. I do find it's funny now looking at Nick Fury, his scars that we know are made by the cat.
By a cat.
Are they just look like mascara lines.
Another interesting factoid, in the UK, it's known as Marvel Avengers Assemble.
Really?
Because of the Avengers TV show.
Oh, yes. I love that show. Emma Peel and John Steed. What if that's anywhere to watch?
Oh, remember that movie? Terrible.
Oh, that was Uma Thurman.
Uma Thurman and Ray Fiennes.
Sean Connery was in that, wasn't he?
Well, Ray Fiennes was Steed, right? And
yes. Uma was Peel. Stinker.
But this was not a stinker. Avengers,
no.
Not a stinker. And I proudly usher it into the 5 Bucket Club. 5 Bucket List, 5 Bucket Club, whatever we want to call it, it is in there now.
Rightfully so. Good call.
Yes, I'm very happy to watch that again. And again, like we were saying, it's going to tie right into Loki now, maybe a little bit into Black Widow. So the time was nigh to watch Avengers again. And
it is fun because they go back into this movie in Endgame.
Yes.
So it really is neat to kind of see the genesis or the original that they've now played against a couple times.
Right.
Yep. Well, at least we're going to move on to bigger and better Cap costumes.
Yes, we are.
The clunker in the bunch.
Although we did get to see America's ass again.
There you go. That is America's ass.
All right. So what are we doing next week? I think we're going back to the theater next week. Are we not? Talking about Emily Blunt.
Oh, Quiet Place 2?
Quiet Place 2. The less said, the better.
I hope it's just all silent.
I'm going to have to go back and watch the first one again just to reacquaint myself with this world.
Yeah, I would like to, but the trailer makes it look like it's almost a prequel, but I guess we just get to see the genesis of the invasion.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, did I ruin that for you? Did you see the trailer?
I didn't see the trailer.
Oh,
No.
sorry.
That's all right.
It for you. I should know better than to open my mouth. I apologize.
Oh, and I know that our co-feature with Quiet Place 2, you've been looking forward to talking about for a very long time. It's just been a question of whether or not we could fit it in or if it fits or what have you, but I think this would be perfect.
You think that this is the perfect time to talk about
I think
Rain
it's
of
the
Fire?
perfect time. Reign of Fire.
I listened to another podcast and they just discussed this and tore it apart and kind of made me a little disillusioned. I need to go back and rewatch it now.
You think, would that actually change your opinion? Somebody else's
I don't
opinion?
know. Sometimes when people point out things that glaring errors overlooked over the years, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. No, I don't think so.
I hope not.
I still challenge it. I do like that movie. So all right, we got our schedule there. It's going along. We're chugging along. Back to the theater, huh?
Back to the theater.
Is this going to be on video on demand or is it theater only?
I'm assuming it's theater only. I haven't seen anything about it being on demand at this point.
Fair enough. So back to the theater we go. I'm excited.
Good
Thank
show.
you very much. Yes, enjoy. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, and come on back next week. You hear?
Yeah.
Bye.
Woohoo.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIconfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
Oh, I got goosebumps. I just got goosebumps.